And good evening and welcome to this webinar. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm the founder and CEO of e-GMAT, and I will be your host today. Along with me, I have Krishna Chaitanya. Krishna is a subject matter expert at e-GMAT, and he's going to be our co-host. He's going to make sure that you guys understand and learn how to pre-think assumptions, which is the topic for today. By the way, you have my email address over here. In case you have any queries about this webinar later on, you can write to me. The topic of the webinar today is pre-thinking for assumptions. And in this webinar, we're going to help you on your journey to pre-thinking. We usually get three segments of users in this webinar. One who don't believe in pre-thinking. The second segment is a segment that believes in pre-thinking but is unable to do it. And the third segment is basically a segment that is believes in pre-thinking, can do it to a certain extent, but haven't mastered it as of yet. The goal with the first segment, my goal with the first segment today would be to make sure that you guys to put in that belief in pre-thinking so that you can start practicing that a lot more. For the second segment, the one that believes in pre-thinking but is unable to do it well, I want to make sure that I give you guys a framework that you can apply and improve your efficiency while doing pre-thinking. And for the third segment, I want to make sure that you can pre-think even in the most difficult scenarios, even on the most challenging of arguments. This is a free webinar, and so it's fairly heavily attended. You can rarely see we have close to 200 students right now in the webinar, and we ask just to make sure that we understand the breakup of this group. We ask a couple of leading questions, just to make sure we make this and modulate this webinar in the most effective way for you guys. So, unlike yesterday's webinar, what I really see is there's clearly one big segment out here where which has its GMAT in 46 to 75 days. It's an excellent time if you have your GMAT in 46 to 75 days to take the GMAT and then start working towards your round one applications. That's about 52% of you. Then we have two or rather two to three equally sized segments. One that has its GMAT in the next 15 days, the other one that has between 16 and 30 days, and the last segment that has between 31 and 45 days before they take their test. And then we have a smaller segment, the smallest of all segments, which hasn't decided the date yet. That's about 17 folks out there. Okay. Now, to master pre-thinking, when I say master, to really go from where you are to that next level, you need about 7 to 8 hours of input. And this is regardless of, if you're in segment 1 to go to segment 2, segment 2 to go to segment 3, and segment 3 to ace pre-thinking and be able to apply it on every assumption problem and to be able to start pre-thinking for strength and weaken, evaluate, and even paradox problems. There are three parts to this webinar. It's 7:07 a.m. my time. In the first part, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to who we are, what is it that we do. That's going to be about 12 minutes. In the second part, we will dive into pre-thinking. This part, I mean, even though it says 120 minutes, it is going to be about, you typically, pre-thinking webinar is a longer webinar. It's going to be about 160 minutes or so. And then in the third part, we will have an open-ended Q&A, which is going to be about 20 minutes. Since this is a heavily read webinar, since this is a long webinar, it's going to be about 3 hours overall, we have some ground rules to make this webinar very efficient. The first ground rule, if you are in this webinar, participate. That's the best way to give feedback to us. There's a reason why both Krishna and I are here. We want to make sure we answer your questions. The second ground rule, if you have a question, make sure that the questions that you ask in the first and second part, and let me actually do some annotations here. Make sure the questions that you pose during the first and second part are relevant to the topic being discussed. Do not pose any personal questions, as we won't be able to take those questions in the first and second part. When we get to this third part of the webinar, you are welcome to pose any personal questions about any topic in this webinar. So yeah, as long as we do this, we will be able to run this webinar efficiently. With that, let's go into the first part of this webinar in which we talk about who we are, what is it that we do. e-GMAT as a company, we're about 4.5 years old, and we started this company in September of 2011 with a goal to help non-native speakers of English language. And I say non-native folks who haven't done their K3 to K12 from USA, UK, Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. Um, since then, we have helped about 15,000 students from about 60 countries. Um, and throughout this time, we've had two achievements that I'm really proud of. First of all, even though we are one of the newest test prep companies, we've been GMAT Club's most successful company. And secondly, um, we've accounted for about 70% of all reviews by non-natives. I talked about GMAT Club's most reviewed company. You can really see the number of reviews that we have versus the number of reviews that a few of the other partners have. What I'm really proud of is how we've performed since the new reviews policy has been put in. Let me ask this question. How many of you, and let me see if I can get a yes, no question over here. Yes. How many of you are aware of the new reviews policy on that has been imposed by GMAT Club? How many of you are aware of it? Okay. We get a few more responses. And I'm going to actually try and increase the audio level just to make sure that you guys are able to hear me clearly. Let me know, is the audio better now? Well, actually, I have a few people who are complaining about the audio. All right. Okay. So GMAT Club's review policy, about 100 responses, about 30% of you know about it, 70% don't. So I'm going to just give you a brief overview. So since October of 2015, GMAT Club has imposed this review policy under which a person can provide a review only if the person has a valid score report or has been an active member for more than 2 years, or has posted for more than 25 times on the forum, or has a valid .edu email address. What it fundamentally means is, what they're trying to do is they're trying to validate whether you're a real person or not when you're posting a review, and that you've actually benefited from taking a prep course. Since then, about 369 reviews have been posted on GMAT Club. This is in the time period that you can see over here, between October 2015 to April of 2016. And we've accounted for more than 50% of those reviews. 209 out of those 369 reviews have been for e-GMAT. And when you compare that for some of the other partners over here, you can really see how they performed in overall. So the fact that I'm really, really proud of. Not only that, we've accounted for upwards of 45% of all the score reports that have been submitted during this period. Now, another thing that I'm really proud of is that this new reviews policy did not have any impact or much impact on the number of reviews being submitted. So just to compare the impact that it had on us versus other partners, what we really did was we compared two identical periods. We compared the period between October and April, so it says February, it's October and April 2014 to 2015, and the similarly sized similar period, or a 6-month period, from October to April 2015 to 2016, which is kind of just till about a week ago or so. What we found was, when we compared these two periods, so period 1 is when there was no reviews policy, which was over here. Period 2 is when we had a reviews policy. Our reviews dropped by about 20, so it's about a 9 to 10% drop. But when you look at what happened for some of the other partners, their number of reviews dropped by about 70%. And similarly, for a few of the other folks, the number of reviews had a much more considerable drop over there. So, and we're very thankful to our students who've been very enthusiastic in posting such reviews. And again, this is all data from GMAT Club. So you guys can go and verify it. So why are our students so successful? I think there are three fundamental reasons for the success of our students. First is the way in which we impart learning. We have this learning architecture that we call progressive learning, in which we make sure that you start at the right point, you learn continuously, you get feedback every 25 minutes of your learning, and you get ample opportunities to self-correct. I'll talk about how this learning architecture or progressive learning is implemented on the e-GMAT CR course. Fundamentally, what we try and do is through technology, and we invest a lot in technology, we try and mimic what a private tutor does. The second reason why we're very successful is the way in which we provide learning. Everything that we do is beautifully audiovisual. What it really means is when you learn using our courses, um, you know, we not only engage your ability to read, but also your audio as well as visual cortex. What it really means is you retain what you've learned a lot better and you're able to apply it on real problems. And you'll see some of it as we go into the second part of this webinar. And the third reason for our success is our focus on core skills. Again, every course that we offer covers from the core foundation to the most advanced concepts. What it fundamentally means is that you don't need to read from books when you study from our courses. And it has that unparalleled focus on application that you'd find is unique to e-GMAT. Since this is a verbal focused webinar, I'm going to talk a bit about our verbal courses out there. Our flagship course is Verbal Online. It is our most popular course. It's designed for students who are looking to improve in 30 days or fewer. Verbal Online includes everything that you need to ace for GMAT Verbal as well as integrated reasoning. So you get our SCCR and RC courses, you get our IR course, you get 5 full-length mocks. For those of you who are GMAT Club members, you guys get GMAT Club tests, and you get an amazing amount of practice through our courses, through Scholaranium, through GMAT Club tests, and the full-length mocks that we get. At $199, it's an amazing value considering that GMAT Club tests by themselves cost $100. So, what does Verbal Online contain? First of all, it's the world's most reviewed course. Regardless of which forum you look on, there's no course that has 489 or the reviews. It is going to be the world's first course to have 500 reviews. Again, as I say, you need all the prep that you need for verbal and integrated reasoning. You get support for defining your GMAT strategy. You get upwards of, you get all your doubts cleared. We've addressed upwards of 14,000 doubts in the last 2.5 years. You get the same progressive learning architecture that we talked about. Full-length mocks, GMAT club tests, and Scholaranium. What it really means is you get all the learning that you need. You get amazing assessments that give you wonderful insights. Scholaranium and GMAT club tests are number 1 and number 2 rated assessment tools in the world. The next course that we offer is Verbal Live Prep. Verbal Live Prep is built on a foundation of Verbal Online. So what you really see is when you compare these rows, you'd find that they are identical. In addition to everything that Verbal Online offers, Verbal Live Prep also includes 36 hours of live instruction. Now, how many of you are retakers over here? Let's do a yes/no poll. Okay, based on the responses that I have, I see there are about 44% of you retakers over here. For retakers, Verbal Live Prep also offers a 4-point score improvement guarantee. What it really means is, let's say you've taken the GMAT once, you have a V30 in your first attempt. With Verbal Live Prep, we guarantee that you'll get a V34, otherwise you get your money back. Even when you have a V37 as a starting score, we guarantee a V41, which is 94 percentile on GMAT Verbal, otherwise you get your money back. There is no course in the world that offers such a guarantee. Not only that, Verbal Live Prep is one course that has delivered on this guarantee tremendously. In the last 2 years, we've had 3,500 students who've taken this course, and we've processed fewer than 33 refunds. When it comes to live courses, it is the world's most reviewed live course. So, live means there's an instructor component over there. It has 438 reviews on GMAT Club. And it is also responsible for the highest number of success stories on GMAT Club Share GMAT Experience. In fact, if you look at the the most appreciated success stories over there, which is in the right hand pane on GMAT Club Share GMAT Review, Share GMAT Experience Forum, you'd find all 5 are by Verbal Live Prep students. So how does Verbal Live Prep compare? Whether you look at the amount of e-learning, the number of live classroom hours, the number of practice questions, the kind of guarantee or the quality of instructors, it's very difficult to find a course that's better than Verbal Live Prep. Who teaches Verbal Live Prep? 4 out of GMAT Club's top 5 rated instructors teach Verbal Live Prep. Here's a typical batch calendar. We actually started our batch yesterday. A batch lasts about 40 days or so. And what you'd really see is all the sessions take place on weekends. So it's designed for working professionals. If you compare this with any other course, you'd notice, if you even compare just the live session, it's way more comprehensive than any other course. All live sessions do take place on weekends, and at the same time, this is about 7:30 p.m. IST, not 8:30. With that, I've come towards the end of this part of the webinar. Now, regardless of which course you buy, there are certain key characteristics of every course. Every course comes with a 7-day money-back policy. What it really means is that if you buy a course, don't like it, let us know. We'll give you your money back as long as you do less than 25% of the course. And 25% is a lot of our courses. Is a lot of course. You get the option of painless upgrades. You can start with the cheapest course and upgrade to the most expensive. You only pay the difference. Fundamentally, at e-GMAT, you always get the best price. For those of you who attend, who join live classes, you get unlimited access for the duration of your subscription. What it really means is, let's say you join the current batch, you not only get the recordings of all the previous batches, but you also have the flexibility to take classes with the next batch or the following batch. We understand life happens. We understand all of you are working professionals. We give you that flexibility, and because of this, we start a batch every 20 days. So if you join the batch today and are unable to continue with it, you're welcome to join the batch, which is starting in the beginning of May. A lot of people ask this question. They really say, hey, you have these wonderful warranties for retakers. What about first-time test takers? But 70% of all our students are first-time test takers. And while we don't have an official warranty for first-time test takers, we do track your improvement. A typical retaker with Verbal Live Prep improves by between 7 and 8 points on a scale of 60. A typical first-time test taker improves by about 10 points on a scale of 60. Not only that, first-time test takers typically improve a lot faster. So with that, these are some of the dates for next batches for Quant and Verbal. Okay, and with that, I'm going to move on to the next part of the webinar. I have a few folks who are asking for the session calendar. You guys can download that over here. It's just for VLP. I don't have it for Quant yet, but I'll be happy to get you one towards the end of the webinar. Okay, let me just make sure this doesn't overlap my presentation pod. Perfect, guys. Okay, with that, let's dive right into pre-thinking. As I said, it's going to be about 2 hours and 20 minutes, so it's going to be about 160 minutes for this part. So here is the process that we're going to follow in this particular webinar. We're going to talk about what your current approach towards solving CR questions is. Then we will do a pre-thinking exercise in which we're going to discuss 2 arguments. Then we will and in this pre-thinking exercise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how to pre-think. We're going to discuss the approach. Then we will test this approach on 4 GMAT style questions, and 2 of these would be official, 2 would be e-GMAT, and you would apply the approach that you've learned in step number 2 to step number 2 to these 4 questions over here. After that, we're going to discuss these questions. So you're first going to take a quiz, solve these 4 questions, and then we're going to review these 4 questions. And while we review that, we'll look at how should you have pre-thought or perform pre-thinking over here. We will also apply the negation test to test whether the right answer is the correct, whether the correct answer that we are talking about is actually the correct answer or not. And then we'll talk about how should you approach assumption questions from now on. If you're an e-GMAT student, this is an important part, because as we go from assumption to evaluate in the next webinar for verbal live prep students, you will be we will be applying that approach, and then from evaluate to strengthen and weaken, we will be extending the pre-thinking approach over there, and then we'll talk about where you can get more practice. So fundamentally, we'll start with how you prepare today. Then we'll look at why pre-thinking is important, and to master assumption questions, and then we'll actually look at the plan forward. My goal really is, after this webinar, if I can give you a blueprint of about where to spend your next 7 to 8 hours, and if you spend those 7 to 8 hours on those things, you should be able to take your pre-thinking ability to that next level. So let's start with your current approach, and I'm going to now hide this, and let me open up a couple of polls over here. So before I talk about your approach, let me just define what pre-thinking is, because there's this confusion in the blogosphere about what pre-thinking is. Pre-thinking is thinking of one potential assumption in your mind in 15 seconds before reviewing the answer choices, or before going to the answer choices. A lot of people and a lot of experts in the GMAT world confuse pre-thinking with predicting. When we are pre-thinking, our goal is not to predict the answer. Our goal is to think of one of the possible assumptions in your mind before we go to the answer choices. Now, pre-thinking as a term has existed in the GMAT world for, I'd say, about a good decade or so. But we were the first company to come up with this process, a methodical way to approach assumption questions using pre-thinking. Prior to this, pre-thinking was something which was more like a black magic, that people either could get it or people couldn't get it. But what we really did was we broke down and we really said, what should you do in step 1, step 2, and step 3? And this is what we'll talk about in this particular webinar. So this is what pre-thinking is. It's not predicting, it's just coming up with one assumption. If you are a skilled pre-thinker, you'd be able to do that in 15 seconds. But even if you're not, you may take longer, but you'd still be able to come up with an assumption. You've got to do this before looking at the answer choices. Once you start looking at the answer choices, then you can actually throw pre-thinking out of the window. It's not gonna, you won't be able to pre-think. Okay, so let's look at the two dominant approaches that people have in the world while solving assumption questions today. The first approach is where people read the argument, look at the answer choices, and come back to the argument, and they iterate between the answer choices and the argument till you reach what I call as an answer that you think is good enough. The second approach, or the second methodology, is where you read the argument, you pre-think the assumption, and then evaluate the answer choices. In this approach, you refer to the argument only when you need to refer to the argument. Now, so tell me, which of the two approaches do you follow? Is it methodology 1, which is, or methodology 2? Okay, let's get a few more responses. I have upwards of 100 responses. Guys, if you're here in this webinar, the best way to make the most of this webinar is to participate in it. So yeah, take a stand. There's no, this is what I call as an extremely low risk environment. You make a mistake here, it doesn't matter. You get feedback, and then you get to improve, get to do better, and I think that's why you're all here. So let me end the poll. So I have about 137 responses, and about 52% of you follow, try and do pre-thinking, and about 47% of you don't even try pre-thinking. That's a pretty tall order for me. My goal really would be that 47% who don't even do pre-thinking today, I want to make sure that you start doing pre-thinking and then start looking at pre-thinking a bit more seriously. Okay, so now let's go towards, so even people who actually do pre-thinking, they spend time on different parts of an assumption question. So the second question is about folks who actually do pre-thinking, not the first segment but the second segment, or people who follow methodology too. If you do pre-thinking, tell me, where do you spend most of your time, or what is the biggest time consumer for you? Is it reading the argument? Is it doing pre-thinking? Is it evaluating the answer choices? Okay, I have most of the responses that I needed. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll, broadcast the results. So, given the number of responses here, I do believe that I think everyone's responded, not just folks who follow methodology 1. One of the classical indicators of folks who don't do pre-thinking or are unable to do pre-thinking well enough is this data point. If you're spending a majority of your time in evaluating the answer choices, which is about 42% of you, then you're not doing pre-thinking, or your pre-thinking is nowhere close to the right answer. Folks who actually do pre-thinking well spend a majority, or the biggest time consumer for them is reading the argument. Folks who are trying to do pre-thinking but are unable to do it very efficiently spend the most amount of time in the pre-thinking step. So if your answer is 1 or 2, you basically are thinking about pre-thinking. If your answer is evaluating the answer choices, then either you're not doing pre-thinking, or your pre-thinking is not good enough, so that you're basically not following the process. And this is a very telling indicator as to where you spend your time. So we will learn pre-thinking. Let's understand before we go towards pre-thinking what an assumption is. Why? Because we're going to do pre-thinking for assumption questions. So I'm going to put in a short answer question over here, and hold on, let me make sure I have the right poll. Just give me 1 second, guys. Yep, here is the poll question. I'm sorry. Yes. So we're going to talk about, we're going to have you pre-think your answers. And just to understand that, we're going to first define what an assumption really is. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to give you a very simple argument, an argument that all of you actually associate yourself with. So the argument over here says Joe scored 500 on the GMAT, therefore he will not get admission in an Ivy League college. What you have to really do is pre-think what is the assumption here. So put in your pre-thinking here, and I'm going to make sure that this lines up nicely. Yes. Okay, great. I have upwards of 50 responses. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. This is an amazing group of people. Close to 100 responses on a short answer poll is amazing. And most of you have kind of gotten the answer right, where you've said to get into an Ivy League college, you need to do better than 500. And again, if you think about this, this is a situation where you understood the argument really well. Why? Because you think about it day in and day out. And because you understood the argument really well, you were able to pre-think an assumption. Now, how would you do it in a methodical fashion? And you might really say, why do I even need to care about doing it in a methodical fashion if I've been able to come up with an assumption? Why? Because we want to do something that's scalable, that scales up to real GMAT arguments. So what's given to us is a factual piece of information where we say Joe scored 500 on the GMAT, and based on this, the author concludes or makes a claim that he won't get any admission from an Ivy League college. So if you think about what the author does, the author actually does some sort of a jump in logic where going from a score of 500, we are now comparing this to an admission in Ivy League college. And what the assumption does is it actually bridges that gap or bridges that jump in logic. So what is the assumption? It says a score of 500 on the GMAT for someone like Joe is unacceptable to Ivy League colleges. Okay, it's a bit more precise than what you've said, because most of you said is score of 500 is simply unacceptable. What we've really done is we've actually added a bit more about it to really say for someone like Joe. But I think you guys get the essence of what an assumption is, which is great. So with that, I want you guys to think about and tell me what is an assumption. How do you define assumption? What is an assumption? Can you type in your answers? I know the question says you're pre-thinking here, but 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Again, an amazing amount of participation, and you can really see this over here. A lot of you have used this word, an assumption is an unstated premise or a hidden premise. While every assumption is an unstated premise, just saying that is not the complete definition of an assumption. Why? Because of what you'd rarely see overall. An assumption has 3 characteristics. There are 3 litmus tests that an assumption should follow. First is an assumption should provide new information. Okay, so what it really means is it should be unstated in the argument. You shouldn't be able to infer that information from the facts or the claims provided in the argument. And when I say the claims other than the conclusion. Okay. The second thing is it must support the conclusion. Okay, so it must make the conclusion stronger. Now, what is an unstated premise? A combination of 1 and 2 is an unstated premise. Why? A premise is something that supports the conclusion. Unstated means it provides new information. Okay, but an assumption does one more thing. It actually satisfies one more test. It is what we call as the must be true test. An assumption must be true for the conclusion to be valid. Every unstated premise is not an assumption, because every unstated premise does not satisfy the must be true test. So if you look at the definition of an assumption is an unstated idea which is required for the conclusion to be valid. Okay, so if you look at the definition, you can really derive 1, 2, and 3 from it. Okay, unstated idea, new information. Required, must be true. The relationship with the conclusion means that it has to go in the same direction as the conclusion. Okay, so if you were to think about an assumption, and if I were to really draw a parallel with something which is a bit more physical and not as I'd say, I don't know if I'd say metaphorical or not as imaginary as an argument, I'd say, how many of you understand what a load-bearing wall is? How many of you understand the term load-bearing wall? And let me actually just write it out over here. What is a load-bearing wall? A load-bearing wall. Okay. No. Okay. For houses, yes. So a load-bearing wall is that wall or that pillar in your house that keeps the roof up. Basically, You take the load bearing down, you take down the load bearing wall, your roof will fall. Okay. Is Does everyone now understand what a load bearing wall is? It's the structure of the house, the structural strength of the house, based on which the roof still stays up. Okay, you take the load bearing wall down, the roof comes down. You can take everything else down in the house, the roof will still stay up. But if you take the load bearing wall down, you basically will bring the roof down. Okay, assumption is that load bearing wall in the argument. The roof is the conclusion. The assumption is that load bearing wall. You take the assumption down, the conclusion will be invalidated. Okay. The reason why I say that is because as we go towards pre-thinking, if you remember this parallel, you'd find it very easy to pre-think. Okay. So let's go down and look at the process that we will follow. What we're going to do is we're going to do a warm-up marathon where we'll do pre-thinking for 2 arguments. Okay, and the process that we'll follow is I'm going to give you an argument. You're going to put in your pre-thinking for that particular argument. I'm going to give you about 2 to 2.5 minutes. Now there won't be any answer choices here. All you will get is an open-ended argument and with a conclusion in it, you'll have to put in your pre-thinking. We will record your answers in a short answer poll as you do that. Then we will follow a method. We'll look at how could you have done your pre-thinking using a methodical approach. And as we do that, we're going to kind of look at this load-bearing argument once again. And then we will also look at some of your submissions. Now, we're not going to take the submission that you put in over here, but based on the previous webinars, we've recorded the most common pitfalls that folks have. And then we'll also evaluate that. And what we'll do is we'll do this for 2 arguments. And hopefully what this would do is it will give you a taste of how to approach pre-thinking. Once we are done with these 2 arguments, we're going to go on the 4 question marathon. Okay, let me clear our answers and remove broadcast results and share the first argument with you. So for every argument, we're going to really follow these 3 steps. First argument, Newsweek versus Time. You've got 2 minutes. Your timer starts now. Last 10 seconds, guys. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. So, let me look at the assumptions. Let me broadcast the results so you guys can read as well. Again, excellent participation, 98 responses. Someone says subscribers like to know about the two new sections. Doesn't talk about which subscribers. Then the other one says coverage of Newsweek in international financial markets, and new section has increased customer base. It's more like a rewording of what is there in the conclusion. No new customers from any other magazines. Okay, that's an interesting one. No new subscribers that weren't previously time on Newsweek readers. Most subscribers of Time were interested in knowing about international financial markets and international movies. It's a very interesting assumption. It's not a correct assumption, but it's a very interesting assumption, and it's an assumption that will make you that you will see in the answer choices, and that a lot of you will choose. That's a very interesting assumption. It will strengthen the conclusion, by the way. It's new information. It does strengthen the conclusion. It is not a must be true. I might actually take this down as an additional one when we review this. I'm just writing this down because I want to make sure that we review this. Okay. Similarly, there were more subscribers interested in international financial markets and movies related to news. Again, interesting one, not a correct one. So here's how we're going to approach this. Okay. The first way in any argument-based question, whether it's of new information type, which is assumption, strengthen, weaken, evaluate, paradox, or whether it's information, whether it's inward-looking questions, which is boldface, you in any question that involves an argument, make sure you isolate the conclusion, okay, and you understand it really, really well. The second step that you have to do is draw the logical structure. Again, these parts, this is a core skill that you need to master. This is common to every question which contains an argument. And when I talk about a logical structure, you basically understand how the author arrives at the conclusion and understand that structure. And again, when you do this, you actually look back from the conclusion into the facts and claims which are there in the argument. When it comes to assumption questions, we do pre-thinking in step 3. And you'll see this process being repeated in strengthen and weaken. It's just how we do pre-thinking is slightly different. And when you combine this information, combine that information of the logical structure with the specific pre-thinking questions that we talk about, you'd be able to come up with assumptions. Okay. So we applied this process implicitly in that one argument about Joe that we talked about. Okay. Now, what is an assumption? Remember this part over here. Let me remember this part over here. Assumption is an unstated idea which is required for the conclusion to be valid. Okay. And I'm going to focus on this part over here, to be valid. Now, remember that load-bearing example. To be valid means to keep the roof up. Okay. So, if you were to figure out which wall in your house is a load-bearing wall, one way to do it is to really take down all the walls till the roof comes down. This is the same method that we're going to follow to figure out what assumptions are. Okay. We're going to ask a question. We're going to look at an argument and ask questions which leads us to scenarios in which the conclusion is falsified or conclusion breaks down. Conclusion breaks down, the roof coming down. The assumption is that such a scenario does not exist. Okay. So let's apply this to this argument which we already solved. It says Joe scored 500 on the GMAT, therefore he will not get admission in an Ivy League colleges. So what is the scenario under which this conclusion will break down? The conclusion being that he will not get admission in Ivy League colleges. if we can show that there is evidence that someone who is like Joe has recently been accepted by an Ivy League college. Okay, so what it really means, an assumption is such a scenario doesn't exist. And how do you come up with that? You really say no one who scores 500 on the GMAT, no one like Joe who scores 500 on the GMAT gets admitted to Ivy League colleges. That's kind of the assumption that you came up with. We will follow the precise same process in all questions, and including this argument that we talked about. Okay, so let's look at and let's distill the argument. And what I'm going to really do is, I think I have this argument in the notes pane over here. I'm going to also have that, so you have this argument for your reference. Okay, actually I don't have that argument in the notes pane, but that's okay over here. So the conclusion of this in this argument is, it says, therefore Newsweek's editor concluded that the parity number, parity means equality number, is due to or is caused by switching of subscribers from Time to Newsweek, and that switching in turn is caused by enhancements done to Newsweek. So there are two components in this conclusion. What the author is saying is, it says enhancement caused some folks to move from Time to Newsweek, and which led to parity in numbers. Okay. So the two aspects of this conclusion is that not only that the parity in numbers is because of people moving from Time to Newsweek. So that's one part of the conclusion. The second part of that conclusion is that people move from Time to Newsweek because of these enhancements. So the editor wants to take credit for those enhancements. Then let's look at what else is there in the argument. The first part provides a fact. It says historically Newsweek had 30% fewer subscribers than Time magazine did. So it sets that context for the argument. Okay. Then it says to improve its market share, Newsweek did some enhancements. Okay. So there are these enhancements that are done, and then once those enhancements are done, now both the magazines have the same number of subscribers. All these three statements are facts. This is not something that we would doubt. And based on these three, what the author is now saying is that, hey, this parity in numbers is because of people moving from Time to Newsweek, and people move from Time to Newsweek because of these enhancements. Is the structure clear? Is the conclusion clear? Perfect. All right, but 90% of you say yes, which I think is something that is great. For those of you for whom it's not clear, you can ask the question in the Q&A pod, and Krishna would be happy to help you. So what questions would you ask? The question that you would ask, remember, it's that load-bearing wall question, which is to really say, it says, under what condition, one of the questions that you can ask is, under what conditions will the switching be caused by something else other than enhancements? So what we're really saying is that people still move from Time to Newsweek, but not because of these enhancements, but because of something else. If this is true, if we get an answer to this question, then the conclusion will break down. So I want to make sure, is it clear that the answer to this question above, will break the conclusion down? Is that part clear? If people move from Time to Newsweek for reasons other than the enhancements, that will break the conclusion down. Okay. So when we ask those questions, and 97% of you really said yes, that's wonderful. If we ask that question, let's see what are the answers that we can get. What are the possible scenarios in which people will move from Time to Newsweek, but not because of these enhancements? First is, if there is no one at Time, a magazine, who likes these enhancements that Newsweek made. Time has 100,000 subscribers, but not one subscriber likes these enhancements. They say these enhancements are not to our taste. Okay. Or if some people may like it, but they may still really say that all all of time subscribers, and all being the key operative word here, consider Time's content better than Newsweek's content despite the enhancement made to Newsweek. If all of Time subscribers considered the corresponding content from Time despite those enhancements, fundamentally really saying, you say, okay, Newsweek, you may have made some enhancements, but the corresponding content from Time is still better. So they don't have a reason to switch. Or and these are the two more likely scenarios that you're going to encounter on the GMAT. And if GMAT were to make this question a lot easier, they would really put in this. They'll really put in a reason, another reason where they'll say people move from Time to Newsweek for some other reason but the enhancements. Okay, this is what I would call as for the same argument a 500 level answer. These two would be a 600 to 650 level answers over there. So if these are the scenarios under which the conclusion is invalidated, then your assumption really is that at least one Time subscriber likes, or some Time subscribers like Newsweek enhancements enough over corresponding content from Time. Look at this. What we have really done is we have taken 1 and 2 and really derived the possible assumption from 1 and 2. We have taken 1 and 2 and let me actually do this. We have derived this assumption from 1 and 2 over here, or 1 or 2, whatever you may really say. Is that part clear? Remember, the part that we are trying to focus on over here is that people still move from Time to Newsweek. We are not trying to falsify that part of the conclusion, but we are trying to falsify the fact that people move from Time to Newsweek for some other reason but these enhancements. Okay, I have about 20% of you who are saying it's not clear. Which aspect of it is not clear? If you can put it in the Q&A part, that would be great. Does quoted enough? That's a great question. Rahul says, does the word enough means that people will switch? So that's a great question, Rahul, and this is something that you really see in all CR questions, and which is they'll use the word enough, they'll use the word significant in the answer choices, and what the words enough and significant mean is that in the context of this argument, that is good enough. That's a really good question, and you will see that if you look at official answer choices. Now remember, there is okay, and then I see a couple of other questions which I say. Tushar asks a question. It's a great question. It says, what about the total number of subscribers? This does not prove that the total number of subscribers is identical. Right, Tushar? That is your question, right? Now, Tushar, let me ask you, what is the definition of an assumption? A definition of an assumption is it's an unstated data point which is required for the conclusion to hold true. An assumption is not something that proves that the conclusion will definitely happen. Okay? It is required for the conclusion to hold true. Do you understand the difference? So an assumption means that you've got to really remove all the roadblocks in the way of conclusion being true. Doesn't mean that it has to go so far that you really said the conclusion, that this proves that the conclusion is true. Grace has another great question. Why can't it simply be that all time subscribers like the enhancements made by this? Okay, that's another great question. And let me actually move forward and see if I have this. Actually, let me write this over here. Just give me 1 second, you'll see this. Okay. Can everyone see this statement? This is an answer choice that Grace really said. Okay. Now, by the way, guys, when I said, have you understood? I didn't mean that all the other assumptions are wrong. It means that the assumption that we talked about over here, did you understand that that's a correct assumption or not? That was it. So all time subscribers like the enhancements made by Newsweek. Okay. Now, let's look at this. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put this and I'm going to, sorry about this. I'm going to put this over here in the notes pane just because it's a lot easier. So here's the notes pane. It says the assumption that the statement that we are to evaluate, that all time subscribers like the enhancements made by Newsweek. Okay. So what is an assumption? Assumption is an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to hold true. Right? Now, is it necessary? So the question that I want to ask you is it necessary to achieve parity in numbers, all time subscribers like the enhancements made by Newsweek? Is that part necessary? Yes, no. Absolutely not. It is not necessary. Even if some time subscribers like the enhancements made by Newsweek, that's enough. So, is this statement a must be true statement? No, it isn't. What it really means is that this is not a valid assumption. Grace, is that clear? Okay. Remember, everything stems from that basic definition of assumption. Assumption is an unstated idea that must be true. That's why we talked about the litmus test. It must provide new information. It must support the conclusion. Your statement provides new information. It supports the conclusion. But it is not must be true. This litmus test, that's why this litmus test is way better than the negation test. It is not must be true for the conclusion to hold true. Now, let's look at the statement that I provided, that I said is an assumption. This is the statement that I talked about. And we're going to put this in a slightly different color so that we can differentiate. This is the statement that I said. Does it provide new information? Yes. Does it support the conclusion? Yes. Is it a must be true? Absolutely. Why is it must be true? Because the negation of at least one or some is, what is the negation? What is the negation for this of this statement? It's that. Let me just put that piece over here. The negation of the statement: no time subscriber likes enhancements enough over the corresponding content from likes music enhancements enough. If this statement is true, the conclusion breaks down. Okay? So that's why always remember these three. A true assumption will provide new information, support the conclusion, and must be true for the conclusion to hold true. If it does not follow this test, your answer will not be the right answer. And all of you have a ton of assumptions. Evaluate those statements. All of you have come up with a lot of pre-thinking. Evaluate that pre-thinking against this litmus test. If it follows that litmus test, it will be the right answer. Let's look at some of the other statements that people have come up. Some people say time did not make any enhancements to these two sections during the time frame in question. Again, is it new information? Yes. Does it support the conclusion? Yes. Is it must be true? No. Time may have made enhancement to these sections, but as long as Newsweek's enhancements were better, we're still okay. The other statement that I really see is that Newsweek did not lose any subscribers to Time magazine. Now, Newsweek can lose subscribers. This is again not a must be true statement for the conclusion to be valid. As long as Newsweek also gains subscribers. Okay, the question to ask is, would the conclusion be falsified if a few people switched from Newsweek to Time for some reason? May not be these enhancements, maybe something else. Okay. All right. Excellent participation, guys. Thank you very much. So the question to ask, so we're going to look at the second question that we can ask. Remember, the conclusion had two parts. And here is the entire conclusion over here. The conclusion had two parts. The conclusion said that, hey, people switched from Time to Newsweek, and that switching was caused by enhancements. So let's really say, what if people didn't switch from Time to Newsweek? That would also break the conclusion down. And this is something that a lot of you have come up with, where you said Newsweek gets all its subscribers from some other source, or Time just loses people. Newsweek doesn't gain anyone, but Time just loses people. Okay. So what did we just learn? What we learned was that there is a systematic approach to approaching falsification questions. You focus on the conclusion, draw the logical structure, ask the question which says, under what scenario, given the facts, would the conclusion no longer be valid? And when you ask the question, remember the load-bearing wall analogy. Okay. The second thing, an argument can have multiple assumptions. We came up with 4 or 5 assumptions in this exercise. The other thing, the assumptions do become visible very, very clearly once you have the argument structure outlined. Now, some of you may be saying, how the hell can I do this on the test? Once you start making the argument structure, you'd really find that it's very easy to create this mental map or create this map in your mind. It takes about a practice on about 15 to 20 questions, but once you start doing it, it becomes very, very, very easy. Okay. The other thing which is really important is you've got to respect the facts in the argument. You can doubt the claims in the argument which are not a part of the conclusion, but you have to respect the facts in the argument, which means you can't come up with an assumption that really says, hey, maybe Newsweek is not equal to Time, or the number of people in Newsweek is not the same as the number of people in Time magazine. Tom says, if new subscribers join, then enhancements need not be the reason to drive the customers. Absolutely, yes. That is correct. As I said, there are two parts of the conclusion, and one way to falsify the conclusion is that. Okay, so we're going to revise how to pre-think once again. Okay, and again, it's going to be a rehash of what we just said. So remember one thing: assumption and conclusion go hand in hand. Conclusion is the roof, assumption is that load-bearing wall. Okay, to understand the to find the assumption, you've got to understand the conclusion. If you don't understand the conclusion, there's no point worrying about assumption. Okay, an assumption must be true for the conclusion to hold true. Assumption must be true for the conclusion to hold true. What it really means is that the scenarios in which the conclusion breaks apart is a scenario in which the assumption is no longer true. So to find the assumption, ask for scenarios or look for scenarios in which the conclusion does not hold. So what it really means is the question that you're going to ask, and you may just write this down. Under what circumstances, given the facts and the argument, will the conclusion break down? If you can find such scenarios, the assumption is there. The assumption is that such a scenario does not exist. Or to revise, to find assumptions, look for scenarios in which the conclusion does not hold or the conclusion breaks down. It's essentially the same thing. The assumption really is that such scenarios are not possible. Okay, or such scenarios do not exist. It's as simple as that. But to do this, you need to have the logical structure in mind. If you don't have the logical structure in mind, you won't be able to do this. Now, mastering pre-thinking is a journey. It's not an on-off switch that you can really do. And here is how that journey is going to unfold for you. What you see over here are two axes. On the y-axis, you have accuracy, it's low, medium, and high. On the x-axis, you have time, it's low, medium, and high. Now, I put this as low, medium, and high because this entire thing is going to be very personal to everyone. But the logical thing being, high is greater than medium is greater than low. Now, when you start pre-thinking, this is what's going to happen. Let's say your accuracy is low and your time to answer questions is medium. Medium for some people may be 1:40, for some others maybe 2:15, a few others maybe 1:15 as well. So when you start pre-thinking, the first thing that's going to happen is that your accuracy is going to go up. Why would the accuracy go up? Because you're spending more time in understanding the argument and you're spending more time in pre-thinking. But at the same time, your time to answer questions is also going to go up. You can really see the direction in which the chart is going. Time to answer question is moving in this direction. And you're going to ask this question, you're going to say, hey, I fall short on time on the verbal section of the test. Why the hell am I following an approach in which the time to answer questions is going up? Okay. This is going to happen. I want you guys to persist pre-thinking at that point in time. As you continue to do pre-thinking, two things are going to happen. Your accuracy is going to continue to go up. Your time to answer questions is going to go down. Okay. Stage 1 to stage 2 is going to be about 15 to 20 questions. Stage 2 to stage 3 is going to be about 10 or 12 questions. Okay. And at that point, you would really say, now I understand why we pre-think. Now I understand the benefit of pre-thinking. And as you go from stage 3 to stage 4, your time to answer questions is going to continue to go down. Your ability in this particular section will continue to go up. And that's when you'll reach that 740, 760, 770 level. And it's that consistency, that persistence that will help you get to that level. Yesterday I got news of one of my students who actually took the GMAT 3 times. He improved from, in the first attempt he had a 710, second attempt he improved from 710 to 750, and then in the third attempt he improved from 750 to 790. Now I would have asked him to stop at 750, but the guy was persistent, he was focused, And you can really see how that focus led to that 750 to 790 improvement. And that guy actually has got admitted to Wharton, Kellogg, Stern, and Columbia. Again, persistent pace. It's remaining focused. It's about understanding what you're trying to do and focusing your energy on that. Now, we have quite a few students. Some of you are e-GMAT students, others are not. If you are an e-GMAT student, I want to kind of get some idea about which stage are you guys in. Are you in stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4 of your pre-thinking? Now, I understand this is just the second webinar in the assumption series, so a lot of you would be in the early stages. Okay, let's get a few more responses over here. Okay, I have the data. We have about 13% of you are in stage 3. A lot of you are in stage 2. And again, let me actually get the right poll. So for those of you who are in, and thank you so much for your participation. For those of you who are in stage 2, or rather, let me say, for those of you who are in stage 3, have you guys seen your accuracy improve and the time to answer questions go down? For those of you who've said they are in stage 3? All right, that's good. For those of you, yeah, and it won't happen for all questions. That's why there's the stage 4. But yeah, easy and medium questions, you'll see that happen. And as you go from stage 3 to stage 4, you'd really see that improve as well. Again, remember, we are still in the second session right now. Now, let me ask this. For those of you who are in stage 2, have you seen your accuracy go up? I know you would have seen your time to answer questions go up. But folks on stage 2, have you seen your accuracy go up? All right. Great. Sometimes, okay. Yes, again, remember, you guys are starting your journey. It's just the beginning. Accuracy is an aggregate measure, not for every question. You'll still make mistakes. If you were at 30%, you'd now be at 60%, which means 40% would still be wrong. And there's one statement that I see over here. It says, depends on my focus and engagement. Yes, and that's very, very important. Remember, the core tell us to get to the structure of the argument. And that's why your focus and engagement is really important. We call this level 1, level 2, and level 3. For those of you who are in stage 2, you're still in level 1 of overall CR. You'll go to level 2 and level 3. What you also really see is level 1 is also is the most time consuming level. Once you start going to level 2, things happen a lot faster. So let's carry on with the process. We're going to follow the same approach, and we're going to get your pre-thinking over here. I'm going to give you another 2 minutes. We're going to go through another exercise before we actually we actually solve full length questions. So you guys can put your pre-thinking here. Here is the argument for you, and you guys have 2 minutes. Last 10 seconds, guys. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So, I have some really good answers. I'm going to broadcast results so you can really see. Some people have gone with a formulaic approach, which again gets them the I'd say a valid assumption, but it's not the kind of assumption you're going to see on the actual test. Again, remember the litmus test that you're really going to have to really apply is basically an assumption. Must provide new information, support the conclusion, and it must be true for the conclusion to hold true. So let's look at this. You guys can read your statements. A greater emphasis on research enhances something, which is again I think the right line of thought. Tenured professors are concerned about the reward system. Good line of thought. This is an e-GMAT question. This is not an official question. Someone really said this is an official question. This is not even like an official question. So we're going to follow that same approach. We'll start with understanding the conclusion. We'll look at how the author arrives at the conclusion, so the structure of the argument, and then we're going to ask the pre-thinking questions. Okay. And the question that we're going to ask again is, under what circumstances, given the facts and the argument, will the conclusion break down? One thing that you would notice is I always talk about given the facts here. We don't talk about given the premises. Why? Because premises can house claims. So always remember given the facts and the argument, not claims. So let's look at this. And I want you guys to tell me first of all. Remember, I said an argument is always about the conclusion. So tell me in this question, which statement is the conclusion? We have three statements. They are numbered 1, 2, and 3. Which one of them is the main conclusion of the argument? So which statement 1, 2, or 3 is the main conclusion of the argument? Let's get a few more responses. Five, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll, broadcast the results. 54% of you, or about 55% of you said statement 2, and you guys are correct. This is indeed the conclusion in the argument. But 26% of you have said statement 1. Statement 1 is context. It's a fact provided. It says that a recently published paper concludes that tenured professors or those on their way to tenure enhance students' learning less than full-time lecturers outside the tenure system do. This is a fact given to you, which is really saying that there's a research research paper, and that paper draws some conclusion. Remember, the conclusion of the argument is always the author's conclusion. It is not someone else's conclusion. The conclusion is always drawn by the author. Then we go to the second statement, which is the main conclusion. It says, clearly the difference between the professors in the tenure system and other full-time lecturers has to do with the reward system for the former. This is what the author is claiming or concluding. And then after that, the author provides further information to support this. Statement 3 is written to support statement 2, which is to really say that the criterion for rewarding tenured faculty typically places a greater emphasis on research than on teaching. Okay. The poll is closed, yes, Amit, because I counted down. All right. So statement 2 is the main conclusion. Remember, conclusion always comes from the author, the authority part, if you've gone through the premise and conclusion files. Almira says, why is number 3 not a conclusion? Almira, is number 3 written to support number 2, or is number 2 written to support number 3? What is the purpose of number 3? Well, we talk about the criteria. It's a good question. Number 3 is the detail there to support number 2, as Sal is saying, which means number 2 is the main conclusion. That's what the author is trying to assert. Okay. Number 3 is the supporting statement to support the main conclusion. Okay. And number 1 is the context that provides the fact stated. The fact in turn supports the conclusion. You guys can really see that, you know. The context supports this statement. This again in turn supports over here. So that's kind of your argument structure over here in short. We're going to actually formally draw a logical structure. I looked at my slides. There is something which is there. So what does the conclusion say? The conclusion says that the reward system causes the difference in the learning outcomes produced by tenured versus non-tenured. Why does the author say that? Because there's a finding which says that non-tenured enhance student learning better, and then there's the reward system which is for tenured professors, which proves a greater emphasis on research than teaching. Now I want to focus on this word greater over here. Okay. This greater, and I'm going to move this pre-thinking out. Me clear, let me open this poll. What is this greater comparing? What is this greater comparing? If I were to really ask you. When it says greater emphasis on research than on teaching, what is it comparing? Focus for whom? Focus for whom? Tenured professors only. Okay. Remember this. This statement is just about tenured professors. It doesn't really tell us anything about the reward system for non-tenured. Read the statement again. Does this statement tell us anything about the reward system for non-tenured professors? Yes, no? No. It only talks about how the reward system for tenured professors is structured. Okay. Just based on that, the author arrives at the conclusion. Okay. So that's a very important thing. So given this, we're going to really ask our pre-thinking questions. Remember the same logical structure on the left hand side now. The question that we will ask is, under what condition will the reward system not cause the difference? Remember, we want to break the conclusion down. The conclusion says causes, we're going to put not cause over here. Under what condition will the reward system not cause a difference between tenured and non-tenured professors, given the facts in the argument? The facts being that tenured enhance student learning better, and the other fact being that for tenured, their reward system puts a greater emphasis on research than on teaching. What are some of the possible scenarios that you can come up with? What if the non-tenured faculty also has a similar emphasis on research? Okay. If both tenured and non-tenured have have identical reward system, then can you really say that the reward system causes the difference in outcomes? If tenured and non-tenured. Okay. So that's good. A lot of you can really see this. Now let's look at another assumption. What if, let the tenured professors have this reward system, but what if most tenured professors don't act as per the reward system? There's one thing that you have a reward system in place. There's another thing that the reward system is enough to motivate people to act as per it. Okay. Then a third piece. What if someone else explains the difference in student outcomes? An example of that would be the scope for improvement. What if The scope for improvement is significantly higher for students who go to non-tenured professors. An example of that would be, let's say, if I were to compare two test prep companies, if all the students coming to test prep company 1 start at 400 level versus all the students coming to test prep company 2 start at 700 level, clearly the scope for improvement for students who start at test prep company 1 is a lot higher. Okay. Remember, the facts and the argument are still maintained. The facts and the argument are still respected over here. In all three scenarios, the conclusion breaks down. We can't really say that the reward system causes the difference between tenured and non-tenured. And the assumption is that such scenarios do not exist. Are these three scenarios clear? There are other scenarios as well, but are these three clear? Can you really see if any one of these is true, the conclusion will break down? Right? Getting a lot of yeses, thank you. So, let's look at a few of the other statements, and I want you to tell me whether they are correct assumptions or not. Let's look at this statement. Non-tenured faculty do not do research. Is this the correct assumption? 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I have 95, 98, 99, 99 responses, 101 responses. Let me end the poll. 101 responses. The question was, is this the correct assumption? Non-tenured faculty do not do research. And 84% of you said no, it is not. And you guys are right, it is not the correct assumption. It's not required for the non-tenured professors to do zero research. What if they do some research which is much less than what a tenured faculty does? The conclusion still holds true. Okay. This is not a must be true statement, and hence it's not an assumption. Then let's look at the second statement. All professors in the tenured system receive rewards for research. Is that an assumption? 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Broadcast results. 72% of you say it's not an assumption, and you are right, it's not an assumption. Why? Is all required? All means 100%. What if 1% of the professors don't receive rewards? Will it break the conclusion down? No, it won't. Hence, this is also not a must be true. Let's look at the third statement. The third statement says the lower emphasis on teaching impacts the capability of tenured faculty to impart effective learning. Let me clear all answers, reopen the poll. Is this a correct assumption? I'm going to give you 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. This is a 700 plus level choice. This is at 750 level choice. 70% of you say yes, it is the correct assumption, and you guys are wrong. It is not a correct assumption. Let me ask a parallel statement to you just to clarify why that is the case. Okay. So now let me ask this. I'm going to move this away and clear all answers. What if, a very hypothetical question, what if GMAT is not required by B schools? So what if B schools don't need a GMAT score? Will it reduce your motivation to take the test? It will, right? No one likes to test study for the GMAT. Absolutely. But here's the second question. Will it reduce your capability to ace the test? And let me just clear our answers. Will it reduce your capability to ace the test? Absolutely no. It will not. No need to study doesn't reduce your capability. You've got to understand what the word capability is. It will not reduce your capability. So then does the lower emphasis on teaching impacts the capability? No, it doesn't impact the capability. So is this a must be true statement? No. The capability is not the same as motivation. As I said, this is a 750 level choice. Yeah, if you said desire, it would have been the correct statement. Capability is a very different word. Thank you, bro. All right. So you guys now saw how GMAT tricks it. We're going to go into that. We're going to shift gears now, and we're going to go to that last part of the webinar where we talk about answering full-length questions. And how we will answer full-length questions is that I'm going to pose a question to you, and I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes to answer every question. Hold on, let me get the first question out first. Poll for the first question out. So it's going to be a 4-question marathon right now. 2.5 to 3 minutes for every question. I'm going to wait for about 100 responses to come in. Here is the poll for the first question. It is out here. All right, 2.5 to 3 minutes. I'm going to disconnect my microphone. Okay, guys, get those answers in. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Now I'm gonna actually go to the next poll, which is so we're gonna move this out. We're gonna bring in the next poll over here. This is a bit odd, guys. Just 1 second. I've suddenly lost my poll question. Okay. Hold on. This is here is your second question, guys. Again, 3 minutes for this one. Like 10 seconds, guys. Get the responses in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll and move it away. Then let's go to the next one. I'm going to clear all answers. And let's see a third question. Okay, guys, get those answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll and move this away. And then let's go towards our last question for the day, which is Shelby will refuse. It's an official question. Okay guys, time's almost up. Put in your answers. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Okay, so before I go forward, let's kind of get some qualitative feedback from you. Let me hide this guy over here, reopen the poll. How was answering the questions? How did it feel like? Some of you found it easy, others found it hard. Someone said second one was tough. I will tell you that your accuracy is about the same in the first and the second one. Okay, you guys did really well on the third one. The fourth one was an official question, so a lot of you knew the answer. The real reason why I have that over here is because despite knowing the answer, people don't understand the right reasoning. So Sohail said, isn't 3 minutes too long? Yes, Sohail, it is too long for most questions. Not for question number 2 over here, it isn't too long, but for others it probably is. However, remember what I said, stage 1 of pre-thinking, you're going to take longer to pre-think. That was my goal. My goal wasn't here. My goal over here was not to really make sure that you're ready for the test, because it's second session in our entire critical reasoning series. My goal was to make sure you have enough headroom, enough breathing room to be able to pre-think. So, and despite the fact that you have 3 minutes, there are lots and lots of questions in which you guys haven't hit 50% accuracy. So now, and thank you so much for your comments and participation. It does keep my energy level up. Now remember one thing, the correct answer, the correct assumption, when you negate it, the conclusion breaks down. That's the fundamental principle. Okay, because an assumption must be true for the conclusion to hold true. So let's look at the questions over here. I'm going to end the polls. And this is question number 1, which is technology bill. I believe choice C was correct, and about 33% of you answered choice C. But let's understand how we'll approach this question. So the conclusion said it is unlikely that this bill have a significant impact on improving overall learning outcomes for students. So basically what the author is saying is that students won't learn any better. That's what the conclusion is saying over here. Okay, that's the main conclusion. Why would the students not learn any better? Because the author says 2 things have not changed. One is the number of learning hours hasn't changed. The other is the number of teachers has not changed. Right? And this statement is written to support the main conclusion. And then the first statement says, puts in some context, which says the recent technology in education bill mandates that during learning hours, students learn using computers instead of reading books as they currently do. So the context, the scenario that we are trying to evaluate over here is to really say if books are replaced by computers, what's going to happen? And the context is that there's a bill which mandates that during learning hours, so there's this very specific time called learning hours, students would learn using computers instead of reading books, and which is what they currently do. And then the second statement the author says, hey, 2 things haven't changed. Students are learning the same number of hours, and the number of teachers that are supporting the students, these things have not changed. And because of this, students are not going to learn any better. That's what the author concludes. Okay. Is the argument clear to everyone? Simple argument, nothing super complex about it, right? Okay, perfect. So let's go and look at the structure of the argument. The conclusion is students won't learn any better with computers. Why? Because 2 things have not changed. Okay, and the context really says that students learn using computers instead of books. Now remember, the context is a fact, this part is a fact, which means both of these have to be respected as we ask our pre-thinking question. Okay. So what question will we ask? And the question that we're going to ask is very simple, which is to really say, under what scenarios will the conclusion break down, which means students will, the learning outcomes will improve, or under what scenario will the students learn better despite the number of teachers being the same and the number of learning hours remaining the same. Okay. This is if you were to pre-think, this would be a very simple pre-thinking if you were to think about it, right? You say, okay, there are two scenarios that can happen. One is if one of the two things happen. One is if computers in the same time frame are much more effective than books. When we say much more effective, or someone says most students learn better from computers, if we can prove that most students learn better from computers in the same time frame, because remember, one of the arguments that the author is making is time frame, the number of learning hours. Okay. Or the second thing that we can really say is if computers make teachers way more efficient. In other words, if computers assist teachers in such a way that one teacher can now be equivalent of two. If, for example, half the time was spent grading students, if computers grade students automatically, then teachers become a lot more efficient. Okay. So if these are the two scenarios in which the argument breaks down, then what is the correct answer? That these scenarios don't exist. One is almost no one find computers to be much more effective than books, or computers do not make teachers much more efficient. Any one of these is a correct assumption. Vesh asks a great question. He says, why couldn't I ask under what scenarios will the students' learning decline? Is declining the same as learning any better? Is declining the same as learning any better? No, it isn't. Vesh, one of the things that you can't really do is change the conclusion. You can't really say, I think the author is saying this when the author may be saying something else. The other thing is your question that you've asked actually shows a lack of understanding of what the word any better means, which really means that you haven't understood the negation article if you've actually read it at all. So I would really recommend that you read the negation article. It's not just relevant for assumption questions, it's also very relevant for inference and boldface and strength and weaken. Okay, so these are the two assumptions that we've come up with this. Now let's evaluate the answer choices. Abhijit says, I'm confused that the argument says that the students are currently using computers. No, it doesn't say that. It says there's a bill which says that students learn using computers instead of books. It doesn't mean that they're currently using computers. As they currently do refers to books. Again, Abhijit, understand sentence structure, very important. Good question, but again, it clearly shows how your understanding improves as you improve in SC. So let's look at various answer choices. So let me actually share the poll. This is how you guys responded. Choice C, I believe, is the correct answer. I don't remember the answer choices. It's either C or D from my memory. But you can really see the accuracy overall is quite low. I don't believe choice C is the correct answer at all. How important is the role of teachers in this argument? As important as the role of number of learning hours. So choice A really says the variety of subjects available on a computer is not more comprehensive. Are we arguing about the variety of subjects? No, we are not. It's out of scope. OFS means out of scope. It's an e-GMAT terminology. Okay. Uh, Second statement says books do not engage learners more effectively than computers do. In a sense, it's saying books are not more effective than computers. Or what it really means is that books are either as effective or less effective than computers, which is not a correct answer. Very few of you actually chose this one. So if you were to negate this statement to really see whether that's a correct answer or not, the negated statement would be books engage learners a lot more effectively than computers do. In the presence of the negated statement, the conclusion holds true. It in fact validates the conclusion. It is the opposite. It seems it's RBI. RBI means relevant but inconclusive. What it really means is, or actually it might even go towards the opposite, that it talks about the relevant stuff, but the information that is presented is in an order which is not effective, or which is not relevant to make it the right answer. Okay. Choice C is the correct answer. Now that I've read the answer choice, I can really see. It says, few if any students who learn using computers report significantly improved. Remember I said the importance of significance. Whenever you see significance in an answer choice or even in the argument, it always means that in the context of what we're talking about, it's enough to move the needle, or it's enough to change the result. Few if any students who learn using computers in school report significantly improved learning outcomes when compared to those who spend the same time learning using books. So what is this answer choice doing? It's comparing two groups of people. One group learns using books. The other group learns using computers, and it really says that out of that group that learns using computers, few report significantly better learning outcomes. Okay. Or in a sense, what it really says is almost no student finds computers to be much more effective than books, which is one of the pre-thinkings that we came up with. Okay. What would it be the negated statement of this? It would really say that at least some students find computers to be much more effective than books. If this negated statement is true, what happens to the conclusion? What it really implies is that the learning outcomes are positively impacted, which means that the conclusion breaks down. Few if any means almost no one. You can really see this. Few if any is almost no one. Few if any in the context of the GMAT is the same as none. It's a very commonly used term over there. Okay, so this is the correct answer choice. About 33% of you got it right. Okay, let's look at choice D. It was a very popular answer choice. Choice D says, students who read a book on any particular topic after learning the topic using a computer do not report significantly learning outcomes. Now, in the argument, let me just look at this. In the argument, is the author asking us to evaluate this scenario where you read a book after learning from a computer? Is this the scenario that the conclusion is drawn based on? No, it is not a scenario. It is completely irrelevant to the conclusion. Okay. The author simply compares learning from computers instead of, not in addition to, instead of learning from books. We are not to debate this scenario, and so you shouldn't even have evaluated this. A lot of you said this is the correct answer. Why? The author is not worried about it. The conclusion is not based on this scenario. Okay, let's look at choice E. While assisting students to learn from computers, teachers will not spend a whole lot of time, an inordinate amount means a whole lot of time, helping them acquainted to technology. In a sense, what it's saying is computers won't waste a teacher's time. It's out of scope, it goes in the opposite direction. Why is it okay? Ramam says it's RBI. How come it's opposite? Opposite because the correct answer said that that computers will make teachers more efficient. This is talking about that computers won't waste a teacher's time. That's why it's opposite. It's talking about teachers, so in that case it talks about relevant stuff, but it goes in the opposite direction. Shilpa has a great question. He says, I'm confused between pre-thinking the assumption and negation technique. Can you tell me the advantages of one versus the other? Shilpa, first of all, it's not one versus the other. Remember this. Okay. A negation technique is a litmus test to that ensures that the correct answer, that the answer choice that you choose is the correct answer. Okay. To be able to apply the negation test, you've got to understand the argument. Pre-thinking is a method that ensures that you understand the argument and that the answer choice that you choose is the correct answer. Okay. All right, one of you is still on tenured professor for some reason. I don't know why. So, can I repeat why it's opposite the option E? Let me actually go back on a couple of slides and see if I can. Okay. Here is the pre-thinking for this argument, and the pre-thinking really said this. If computers assist teachers such that one teacher can be the equivalent of two, which means if computers make teachers a lot more efficient. This answer choice talks about making teachers inefficient. Okay, that's why option E is incorrect. It goes in the opposite direction. Someone really said, if it's making teachers inefficient, isn't it proving the conclusion? Yes, it supports the conclusion. But for the conclusion to be true, is it a must be true condition? Is it a must be true condition when I look at choice E over here? And let me just really say, let me just go to choice E once again. When you look at choice E, it says computers will not waste teachers' time. Is that a must be true condition? Is this something that must be true for the conclusion to hold true? No, it isn't a must be true condition. In other words, if I negate this answer choice, the negation of this answer choice will be computers let me just make sure I put in a apostrophe S. So this is the negated part. This is the negated version of this choice. Just 1 second. Let me see if I can. This is the negated version of this choice. Now, does this negated version break the conclusion? If we say computers are going to waste teachers' time, does it falsify the conclusion? Not at all. That's why it's not the correct answer. Remember, this is not a must be true. The litmus test is really important. And you're going to, it is a strengthener, it's not a must be true. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not going to go back to this. It's one of those things with the free webinars. We get lots and lots of students where you're not at that level where you can absorb all the questions, especially if you haven't done the pre exercises. Also, I would recommend that you go through the recording, you go through the PDF. If you still have a doubt, and if you are an e-GMAT student, post it in the relevant forum. Or bring it up in the next webinar. I'm sure we'll be able we'll be happy to teach you in the next webinar. It's something that we don't do in the paid sessions because everyone who comes in the paid sessions is extremely well prepared. Okay, this question, RDS technology, 27% accuracy on this particular question. So it was the most difficult question. This is a GMAT prep question. It's an old GMAT prep question, and it's a very good question. The beauty of this question is the logic behind this question is very simple. It's very similar to the logic behind question number 1, which was very, very simple. Okay. So I'm going to really look at what this question really says. And let me put in the notes pane over here. Here is the notes pane. You guys can still see the argument over here. And let me just make the font slightly bigger. There is the notes pane, and I'm going to look at this. So the conclusion is the argument, excuse me, the author's conclusion in this argument is the number of Verlanders receiving special program information did not increase significantly in this time period from 1994 to 1996. So fundamentally what the author is saying is that number of people who receive this has not gone up. Then the author says, however, so actually let me just read this argument. This is a complicated argument before we go through the structure. Since we're going to read the argument, I'm going to go over here because this is where the argument really is. It says radio stations with RDS technology broadcast a special kind of program, a special program which only radios with this RDS feature can receive. So fundamentally, there are these special kind of radio stations, okay, which have this RDS technology, and you need to have a radio with RDS feature to be able to receive this technology. Between 94 and 96, this entire argument is about this time span. Okay, between 94 and 96, the number of radio stations, RDS radio stations in V, Verlanders V, let's call it V, increased from 250 to 600. So there was a significant increase. They more than doubled. Okay, so there's one fact given to you. Then the author says, however, since the number of receiving radios, so RDS equipped radios in V, remained about the same in 96 as was in 94, the number of people in V receiving that special program did not increase significantly. It says, again, significantly means not a whole lot. There can be a minuscule increase, but not a whole lot. Is the argument clear? Is overall the argument clear? Yes, no? Get a few more responses. Okay, perfect. The argument's clear to most of you. So as I say, long argument but not very complex in logic. So what the author is trying to assert is that the number of people who receive this special program, we are not concerned about any other program, but the special program did not go up a whole lot. Remember the word significantly during this duration. Okay. Then why the author is able to assert this is, it says, because the number of receiving radios did not go up or is about the same in 96 as in 94. So this is written to support the conclusion. Then the author says there's one more thing. Between 94 and 96, the number of RDS stations, the number of transmitting stations increased from 250 to 600, so it's more than doubled. Okay. Now this context or this fact goes against the conclusion. Why? Because statement 3, actually it says 2 over here, it should be 3. This is 3. This statement number 3 supports the main conclusion, and number 2 goes against number 3. So number 2 in a sense goes against the main conclusion. And then we have context, which really says that to receive the special programming you need to have RDS feature. So special programming has two requirements. One is you must get information from an RDS station. Okay, so a radio station must have RDS technology, and the receiving radio must have the RDS feature. Is this argument clear? Is this part clear? All right, perfect. One of the things with critical reasoning is you've got to stay absolutely focused. If you're not focused, you're going to miss things. So let's draw the logical structure. Conclusion: very few additional Verlanders receive this RDS programming. Why? Because A, the number of radios hasn't changed, and B, the number of RDS stations increased a lot. In fact, it's more than doubled. The context is, to receive RDS programming, you need RDS radios. Okay. So remember these two facts. Receiving radios not increased, number of transmitting stations increased a lot. So we really say that very few additional Verlanders received RDS programming. So what is the question that you're going to ask yourself if you were to find out what an assumption is? Under what scenario would the conclusion break down? Let's put in an open-ended poll. Under what scenario would the conclusion break down? Can you write down the pre-thinking question? What is the question that you will ask? Can you guys do that? Okay. Not the answer. A lot of you are giving me what the correct answer is. And some of you are actually going against the fact. It says if there were more RDS radios, we are given that the number of RDS radios have remained the same. I have another person who says some number of people receive more RDS programs. The number of RDS programs is not the subject of the conclusion. The number of people receiving RDS programming is the subject. From 94 to 96, maybe people are listening to RDS programs for 2 hours instead of 30 minutes. That is the author is not concerned with that. What the author is saying is that if in 1994 100 people received RDS programming, in 1996 that number is not going to be very different. It's going to be 100 or 99 or 101. It's not going to be 150. Okay. So the question that you're going to ask is, under what condition will there be a significant addition to the number of people receiving RDS programming? Not additional. I actually should correct this. It should be RDS programming. Hold on. I'm going to just correct this. RDS programming, despite the facts in the argument, despite having very few additional radios in V and with a lot more stations. So the question is, under what conditions will more stations lead to more people receiving this programming, even though the number of radios has not changed a whole lot? There are only two ways that this could happen. Okay, if as you added more stations, you've improved coverage, right? If you've added more stations, you've improved coverage. So if additional stations now cover areas where there was no coverage earlier. Okay. Or the other scenario is if a lot more people are listening to every radio. So if, for example, the radios have now moved from houses to Starbucks, where in a house only 1 or 2 people listen to a radio, but in Starbucks there are 20 people listening to a radio. Okay. More interest is along the same line. This is along the lines of number 2 over here. If you really say there's higher interest, what you're really talking about is the number of people per radio has gone up. In either scenarios, you're gonna have more people listening to RDS programming in 1996. So assumptions are that, hey, the new stations have not increased coverage, or the people per radio on average is about the same. Is the pre-thinking clear, guys? RDS technology improved. So what would the improvement in technology do? Someone says RDS technology improved. What would that improvement do? It would only either increase coverage or increase the number of people. Most likely it's going to increase coverage. Okay. Now let's look at the answer choices. Choice A is along the same lines of the correct answer choice in the previous question. It says, few if any of RDS stations that began broadcasting after 94. Few if any means almost no one. Remember we had said of RDS stations that began broadcasting after 94. So we're talking about the news stations. Broadcast to people with RDS radios, so with the right radios, living in areas not previously reached by RDS station. So essentially what it really says is that very few of the new radio stations, or almost none of the new radio stations, broadcast to people who did not have coverage earlier, or in other words, almost none of the new radio stations increased the coverage of RDS programming. Can you understand how, can you see how this complex worded answer choice leads to this? Right? Okay, perfect. It is complex, but that's what's going to happen in the 700 level problem. This is the correct answer. The negated statement for this would be that at least some radio stations increase coverage, and if this is true, the conclusion breaks apart, which means this is the correct answer. Now, I'm going to discuss the other answer choices, but remember this, the conclusion is about the transient period between 94 and 96. It's not about what happened in 94. It's not about what happened in 96. It's about what happened during that time. Okay, let's look at choice B. Choice B talks about something in 96. Again, if you were smart about it, you would really just say, hey, the conclusion is about what happened in that time period. And this talks about what happened in 96. So this can't be the correct answer, but let's kind of apply logic beyond that. It says in 1996, most Overlanders, most means greater than 50% of the population, who lived within the listening area of an RDS station already had an RDS equipped radio. Again, this talks about a scenario in 1996. What it really says is that more than 50% of people who lived within who were covered already had an RDS station, RDS radio. Does that have anything to do with our conclusion? Where the conclusion says that the number of people between 94 and 96 did not increase. Number of people who listened to the special programming between 94 and 96 did not increase. Does it have anything to do with the conclusion? No. Is it must be true? Should everyone or should most people who live within the listening area have an RDS radio for the conclusion to hold true? Remember, the conclusion is that the number of people who are listening to this programming has not gone up. Okay. Choice C actually goes even further off. It says equipping a radio with RDS technology does not decrease a station's listening area. Why do we care about a station's listening area? Why? I mean, which, if you think about a station's listening area, what kind of programming will it impact? What kind of programming will it impact? Will it impact special programming or other programming? Other programming. Is the conclusion worried about other programming? It's not going to impact both. Why? Because if you don't have RDS technology, you don't have RDS programming, so it can't impact RDS special programming anyway. Special programming only comes with RDS technology. So no RDS, no special. So it only impacts the other programming. Okay? Is the conclusion concerned about other programming? Not at all. So we are not worried about it. Let's look at choice D. In 1996, Verlanders who did not own RDS radios, equipped to receive RDS radios, could not receive any programming. Are we concerned about any programming, guys? Are we concerned about any programming? Yes, no? Are we concerned about any programming over here? No, we are not. Hence, this is not the correct answer. Choice C says, talks about the type of programming. We are not worried about the type of programming that RDS stations offered. Okay, it's completely irrelevant to the conclusion. Remember, focus on the conclusion. Focus on the conclusion, the answer would be right there. Now, I'm not going to go through Achiever School. 77% of you got it right. So that's something which is great. It just seemed like that you guys were getting into the groove over here. Okay. I'm going to look at Shelby will refuse. And Shelby will refuse. I'm going to do it because, and let me actually get to the right slide. I'm going to do Shelby will refuse. Why? Because Shelby will refuse is such an amazing answer. Choice C was the correct answer. And I'm going to give you the PDF, so don't worry about it. So, and now some of you really said, why do we actually put in an official question over here if you guys know the answer? The reason why we put in an official question, and this one over here, is because this question is worded in such a beautiful manner that to recreate this question, I'd have to reuse the language, and I don't want to do that because that would be plagiarism. So it's best to credit the question and make sure that you guys get the learning, because even people who get this question right don't get it right for the right reasons. Okay. So let's look at the argument. The argument says last year all refuse as garbage collected by this particular city, Shelbyville City Services, was burned. This burning or this incineration generated a large quantity of residual ash. Okay, so you burned everything, that generated a ton of ash over there. Hold on, let me make sure I am on the right slide at my end. Okay, actually I have this over here, so let's do this. Last year, hold on. So last year, all the refuse collected by Shelbyville City Services was incinerated. This incineration generated a large quantity of ash. In order to reduce the amount of residual ash to half of last year's total, the city has revamped its collection program. So what the goal really is that we want to reduce the amount of ash generated this year to half of last year's total. This year, city services will separate for recycling enough refuse, enough garbage to reduce the number of truckloads of refuse to be incinerated to half of last year's number. So let's understand this over here. Last year, let's assume this much garbage was generated. So did we recycle anything last year? No. So basically we did not recycle anything. We sent everything for incineration. Right? So since you sent everything for incineration, let me ask a question. Let's assume one of these garbage cans is 1 truckload. How many truckloads did we send last year for incineration? Can you guys count? If one garbage can is 1 truckload, can you count how many truckloads? There are 10 garbage cans, so there are 10 truckloads. So now let's assume this year we generate a similar amount of refuse. If we generate a similar amount of refuse, how many truckloads will we be sending this year for incineration? How many truckloads? 5, right? Half of last year's total. If we generate a similar amount of refuse, we're going to be separating 5 for recycling and the other 5 are going to go for incineration. Is that clear to everyone? Yes? Okay. Now comes the interesting question. Tell me how many truckloads will we send for incineration if the amount of refuse collected is 10 times. If we collect 10 times as high refuse as what we collected last year, then how many truckloads will we be sending for incineration? Five. Let's get some answers. If we collect 10 times the refuse, how many truckloads will we be sending for incineration? 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Now 55% of you marked the answer correctly, which means 55% of you should have understood the argument. Only 25% of you have answered this question correctly, which means really only 25% of you have understood the argument well. 65.7% of you really say 50 truckloads would be sent, and you guys are wrong. Confused? Why 50 is wrong? Confused? Why is 5 correct despite 10x more refuse? Let's read this statement, and that's the beauty of this question. It says, this year city services will separate for recycling enough refuse to reduce the number of truckloads to be incinerated to half of last year's number. What it's really saying is, regardless of how much garbage we collect, we are only going to send half as many truckloads, even if we collect 100x as much garbage. Okay? So regardless of the amount of garbage, you're only going to get half of last year's number. Okay? They say we're going to do that. Is this clear? Yes, no? The answer is still 5. And that's what is the trick. So if you look at the logical structure, what you really see is the conclusion is the goal is to reduce the ash ban by half to half of last year's number. Last statement is a supporting statement. It's very important to understand this. This argument has the conclusion in the center. And then you have the two contexts over there. So if you draw the logical structure and you really say the conclusion is that the ash generated would be half of what was generated last year. How? We will only send half as many truckloads. Okay. and we will recycle the remaining. And what's given to you is last year everything that was collected was burned. So if this is the case, then the only question that you have to ask yourself is, under what conditions will the ash generated be higher than 50%, if we only send half as many truckloads for incineration? And when you ask this question, your pre-thinking answer is, under what condition will the amount of ash be greater than 50% if you only get half as many truckloads? If the 5 truckloads this year generate more ash than the 5 truckloads last year, or if on an average, the correct answer is, there's only one scenario, if the ash generated per truckload this year is higher than that generated last year. If last year each truckload generated 100 kilograms of ash and this year each truckload is generating 125 kilograms of ash, then we have a problem. So the only assumption is that the ash per truckload is no greater than that last year. Once you do this pre-thinking, what you'd find is rejecting every answer choice becomes very easy. Choice A, and by the way, I'm going to share the results. This is how you guys performed. I think choice D is the correct answer, but just 56% of you answered this correctly. Choice A says, this year no material that city services would separate for recycling will be incinerated. If you apply the negation test on this, this will pass. Unfortunately, this answer choice does not provide any new material. There's no new information. This piece can be inferred from the argument. Hence, it's not the correct answer. That's a classic case of when you apply the negation test like a hammer on every answer choice, you will make mistakes. Choice B talks about costs. Okay, we're not worried about costs in this argument. Choice C talks about the proportion of recyclable materials that collected. We don't care about this because we are only going to get half as many truckloads for incineration. Where the rest goes, I don't really care. Choice D is the precise pre-thinking that we came up with, which talks about ash per truckload over here, which is what we really talked about. Okay. Choice E, and there's a negative statement as well, but I think you don't need to worry about it. Choice E really talks about the total quantity of ash and compares that to that last year. Again, don't care about it. Why? Because I'm only going to get half as many truckloads as last year. Okay. Okay. So with that, we've come to the end of the second of this webinar. I'm going to briefly talk about what do you do from here. Okay, how do you become the CR champ? How do you ace pre-thinking in these next 5 days, so that when you go towards evaluate, which is only open to our verbal live prep students, that you ace evaluate as well. Okay, I'm going to give you the PDF for question 3. I know some of you are asking. The PDF is there and it's very self-explanatory. So one thing hopefully that I've proven to you is that pre-thinking is not rocket science. If you can follow a methodical approach, you can ace pre-thinking. You can get to pre-thinking assumptions very, very easily. Okay, so what are the next steps? Make sure you go through the premise and conclusion concepts. Make sure you take the CR ability quiz, which is out there. Make sure you read and understand and solve the question in the negation article. We will give you all 3 things. Also, when you get the PDF, the links are active in the PDF itself. So, if you are an e-GMAT student, here are the steps that you're going to go through. Make sure you finish the foundation module. The premise and conclusion files tell you about the authority, tell you about the structure of the argument, they tell you about how to isolate the conclusion. Okay. Then make sure you focus one core module at a time. Start with inference, go to assumption, evaluate, strengthen, weaken, and so on. Okay. Every core module has the relevant concept files. It, it also has the relevant application files and the relevant practice files. Every concept file comes with concept quizzes. The concept quizzes have multiple correct answers. Make sure you understand that. They are really designed to test you. Okay. Um, Make sure you go through the application files, make sure you follow the process, make sure you go through the practice file, look at the solutions, and then do the OG questions after the practice quizzes. Remember this, assessments happen at multiple touch points throughout this entire process. There are post-assessment quizzes in concept files, um, and in application files and in the practice quizzes. Once you're done with the course, go and again practice in Scholarium, where you have 300 and more than 350 additional full-length questions. It's very important that you understand how the e-GMAT course is designed. We have what we call as learning nuggets or modules, and in each module we've integrated concepts, applications, and evaluation. Okay. The important thing being that we give you assessments every 20 to 25 minutes of your learning, and then a major assessment every 2 to 3 hours. We give you the opportunity to self-correct. The onus is on you to make sure that you look at that data and you self-correct. An example is, this is the assumption module where we start with the assumption concept file. Okay. Then you go through the negation test, then you understand the difference between inference and assumption. A student over here asked a question which we didn't discuss. He really said, the assumption that we've come up, can't we just infer? Isn't this something that is inferred from the argument itself? No, it isn't. And that's again the differences between inference and assumption. It may seem that you can do it, but no. Then we talk about how to pre-think and for a special class of passages, just cause and effect passages. Then we go through the assumption application file, practice file, and then we have this list of OG questions and solutions that you must go through. Our solutions are super detailed. They talk about pre-thinking. Make sure you look at those solutions. There are quizzes at every level. Make sure you ace those quizzes. If you're unable to score well, when I say well, greater than 80% on these quizzes, look at the solutions. Revise the relevant portions of the files. Overall, in the entire course, you have more than 16 concept files, more than 14 application files, 10 assessments. There are 6 live sessions for those of you who are part of Verbal Live Prep or GMAT Live Prep, and amazing number of questions and solutions. If you look at this, the official guide barely has about 220 questions, I think. Actually, maybe even fewer than that. So, how do students get that 100 plus point score improvement? I talked about consistently improving. I gave the example of that guy who scored a 790. They do that by building on core skills. They solve every question using pre-thinking. When you're learning something, don't time yourself. Focus on getting the process right. Do the OG questions, even if you've done them, do them again. Make sure you're applying the method. And if you've not done them, don't leave the official questions towards the end. Again, do well in all the quizzes. And if you don't, revise that part. Lastly, even if you answer a question correctly, make sure you look at the detailed solution. Fundamentally, as you go through the course, this is all that you would go through. And what it really means is you have these 10 different modules that will come through, and you don't need anything else if you do this well. Use the assessment, study smartly, and look at the feedback at various points. Okay. With e-GMAT, you can master one module in 10 days, or you can ace the entire verbal in 80 hours, or which is about 30 days for most working professionals. Okay, guys, with that, we've come to the end of this webinar. We are in that open-ended Q&A that I talked about earlier. I'm going to hide this part. I'm going to give you the PDF. If for those of you who are viewing the recordings, you guys can still download the PDF even from the recordings. The recordings are very, very live. This is the batch calendars for those of you who want the calendars for the next batch. This is the session PDF over here that you can download. Actually, this is the older PDF. Let me get you the new PDF. This is the PDF from the previous webinar. Let me get the PDF. Here is the new PDF from today. It should be there in another couple of seconds. And for those of you who have not downloaded the negation article, you can download the negation test series over here. Okay, guys, with that, I want you guys to give some feedback or comments. Tell me what was your biggest takeaway in the short answer poll. What is the biggest takeaway from this webinar? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you for the praise. There's a question which says, uh, Karan, I think, has this question. It says, don't you provide any need-based coupons as I'm out of funds? Our goal really is to provide courses which are, really well priced and which everyone can afford. If you think about verbal online for 199, it's less than the price for the test that you actually pay. We don't like to play these coupons games. I think it's not worth our time. We are a 25-person organization that focuses purely on R&D. We have some of the most elite instructors in the industry, and we pay them well. So our goal is to give something that's scalable, that's valuable to everyone, and our results show that. Then there's another question: how do you compare Empower GMAT to you guys? I don't know. I haven't taken their course. I'll very frankly say that. I will actually just purely look at the results, which is to really say, hey, if you look at the number of success, Empower GMAT claims they have upwards of 15,000 students. If you go on their website, we claim we have 14,800. They have, I think, about what, 35 reviews on GMAT Club. We have upwards of 1,000. You can look at the success rate over there and really make that decision yourself. Another thing is, just to really tell you, Empower GMAT says that they provide you the 1 hour of tutoring or something if you on admission consulting if you improve more than 60 points. We don't do any of that because a lot of people improve more than 60 points. If we did that, we won't even have time to impart that kind of stuff. So look at the facts, make the decision yourself. That's what I would say. Are the questions same in two books, Verbal Guide and GMAT Official Guide? No, Verbal Review and GMAT Official Guide are completely different. What time will the recordings of the session be available? We should be sending the recording on another 30 minutes. When are we moving towards quant webinars? We do offer some quant webinars. We had one yesterday. With e-GMAT course, do we have solutions of all OG questions? I think a majority of official questions in SC and CR we do have solutions. One thing that I would really say is our solutions are way more comprehensive and then the solutions from other guys. For example, if you go and look at the solutions from someone else, you'd really see the solutions are 4 to 5 lines. That e-GMAT, every solution is a page and a half. We give you all the description. What's the cost of complete GMAT course? I really see that. Um, you can look at all the prices on our website. GMAT online costs uh, $299 and GMAT live prep costs $499. So I'm going to actually give you the pricing page. You guys can really look at the prices of packages, individual courses, and verbal and quant packages as well. Can you pay using net banking? Uh, you can write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com and we will be happy to provide you with details for net banking. How much raw score should I tentatively target to get to 14 verbal? 14 verbal is a raw score. So I think, Abhishek, you've got to reword your question slightly differently. Jay says, I'm struggling with CR since a month now. Okay. And I've scored highest as 77 percentile in OG10 and the rest of OG. First of all, Jay, I'm not sure who told you to study from OG10. OG10 is not at all relevant in today's world. OG10 is from 2003. OG10 is something that the makers of GMAT banished because it was written by an organization that did not know what to test on official guide. So if you have OG10, please throw it away. Okay. Number one. Number two, accuracy is not the same as ability. Take our ability quiz, and if you have 77 percentile in our ability quiz, you can freely move on to the next section. Abhishek says, how many questions can you should you get correct to get a V40? Um, that range is from out of 40 questions, you can get a V40 with 27 questions correct. You can also get a V40 with 36 questions correct. Accuracy is a very, very bad indicator on the GMAT. It's about ability. Um, the key question is, what abilities do you need to get a V40? You need about 80% ability in so there are multiple ways to get a V40. You get 90% ability in one section and get 70% ability in the remaining two sections, you'll get a V40. You get 80% ability in all three sections, you'll get a V40 as well. And to understand what ability is, just Google Scholaranium or attend the next webinar, which is Strategy Session 1. Amit says, I really screwed up today. Maybe the weekend work took its toll. Amit, again, when you are doing critical reasoning is very taxing. You've got to have a fresh mind. You've got to be willing to do it. Otherwise, you're going to find that your performance is going to go up. And it's not just with you. It's there with everyone. If I am not fully bought into doing critical reasoning, if my mind's not focused, I make mistakes. Okay. OG Verbal Review 2016, you can order it from Amazon, both Amazon India, Amazon US, or Amazon Europe. So again, coming back to this, guys, the important thing over here is not really whether you got all the questions right or not. I know getting question right gives you confidence, but the important thing is, are you learning? Even when you made a mistake, have you noted down that mistake to make sure that you're not going to repeat that mistake again? Because that is learning, that is improvement, that is getting to that 730, 740 level. If you haven't done that, then unfortunately getting all the questions right is not going to help you improve. Kunal, Kunal is an e-GMAT student, says, what's a better guideline to understand how to follow the course? Kunal, with your purchase receipt, you got a very comprehensive study plan which says what you should learn every 30 minutes of your learning. Start with strategy session 1, follow that study plan. Okay. Tanya, what's a good score for Ross? If you are a Russian, a good score is 710, 720. If you are an Indian, 740 to 750. Um, the question says GMAT launches a new official guide every year in June. Does it mean that we have to solve OG 2017? Guys, when GMAT launches a new OG, there aren't a whole lot. I mean, the biggest change that I've had seen in OG is probably 20% of the questions. And they don't change the questions a whole lot. They just add a few new questions. The questions talk about a slightly renewed focus that they've had. It doesn't mean that you have to really get a new book. No, it does not. Tanya, Singapore. I don't know what Singapore PR is. It's NSU or NUS. Do B schools give different weights to quant versus verbal? Not mostly, I would say, but there are certain B schools that actually are very concerned about your quant score. So if you were to go to Stern School of Business or GSP Chicago, which are more quant focused schools, if you have a low quant score, they'll be very concerned. And we can ask profile and college related questions? Yes. How should I practice in Scholaranium? All easy and medium or just hard question? That's a good question. The goal of Scholaranium is to help you improve. And hold on. And let me send you look at these two videos over here and also look at this blog post to really tell you how to utilize Scholaranium to improve. Okay. Do number of attempts matter while applying to top B schools? Till as long as you're improving, it doesn't. The number of attempts do not matter, but you've got to improve. Here is a guy who actually is a very old student of ours. I believe he took the GMAT 5 or 6 times, and he was able to get into. This guy actually got into Darden, so you guys can really see. And we've had number of students who've done multiple attempts and have gotten to top B schools. So yeah. What is the difference between live versus online? So Amy, all our live courses include instructor-led live sessions. So the schedule that you see up there for verbal is a schedule for verbal sessions. We similarly have a schedule for quant sessions as well. That's what live is. Online, every live course includes everything which is there in the online course, and then it includes our instructor-led sessions. When you join a live course, what it really means is that in the live sessions, we kind of focus on tracking your progress, again, provided you attend the live sessions and we give you feedback. So there's a lot more personalization that happens. In terms of the content, both our online and live courses are complete. Both of them are very well appreciated. I mean, Verbal Online is the world's most appreciated online course. It's going to be the world's first course to get 500 reviews. At the same time, the average score improvement for Verbal Live is greater than that of Verbal Online. It just depends on, if you need that additional guidance, take a live course. If you don't, take an online course. Tanya says with the permanent PR is permanent residency. Okay, help me get into in US or would I still be considered an Indian? It depends on how many people who are with a similar profile who are applying over there. Uh, Ganga Simha says, I am provide executive MBA through GMAT score. What's the minimum score they consider? I think 700 to 710. It's somewhere on the GMAX website. It's 700 or 710 is the minimum score that they would consider. So Uja says, which area should I highlight in my resume or in my interview if you have average ACADS? One thing which is very important really is to really say what is it that shines in your candidacy. And if you have average ACADS, I had average ACADS by the way. So in that case, talk about your work experience, talk about your achievements. That's something that is very, very important. Okay. So so yeah, talk about that. The goal is to focus discussion, to take the discussion to a point where 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 people talk about your strengths and rather than worry about discussing your weakness. Kunal says, how important is our current occupation while applying for the GMAT? And what's more important, score or profile? Uh, so I'll answer the latter question first, which is both score and profile are important. And if you want to really see how important they are, here's an academic exercise with regards to a calculator. Hold on. By one of our partners, Oringo. You can really see the impact that GMAT puts in, as well as the impact that your profile puts in. Also, I'm going to give you another link, which is there on GMAT Club. Hold on, let me see. Here is a, a research that shows the impact of GMAT score on top business schools. What this research really shows is that your probability of admission goes up. It increases from as low as 9% if you have a score at 700 or below to as high as 50% at 750. Even if you, yeah. So I mean, there's a huge increase in probability of admissions. At the same time, your profile is also very, very important. Vivek says, should we do this course only after getting all the basic concepts done and some practice? Absolutely not. This, as I say, when you do this course, you don't need anything else. Amtam says, I've followed the approach of pre-thinking like we did in all the 4 questions. Despite that, I'm unable to get to figure out questions and understand what can falsify. So how do I go about? First of all, download the presentation and ask yourself, why is it that you weren't able to ask the same questions? A or B, what questions were you asking? If you're asking the wrong questions, um, and then you've got to really understand what led you to answer the wrong questions. Did you not understand the argument, or was it that somehow the logic in the argument confused you? As I said, the important thing really is to improve from here on. You can't simply improve by solving more questions. You've got to focus on why you're making a mistake. As long as you focus on that, improvement comes. Here is a success story that I want you to review. This is an interview. by a guy who improved to 730. This guy is actually a researcher, and he has an amazing quote, which I want you to really look at. Take a look at this interview. This is an amazing interview. Ahuja says, how to answer the interviewer if the motive behind an MBA is career change? What is the problem in answering if your motive is career change? You've been doing something, you want to do something else in life. An MBA is a perfect reason to do that. I did that. I did research prior to doing my MBA, and I was building things that have just come to light today. I mean, the kind of technologies that you see in cell phone today was something that I was building in 2002 and 2003. And my motive for doing an MBA is that I wanted more control over what I built, because if you're doing research and building stuff that's 10 years down the line, you don't even know whether it's going to see the light of day or not. And so I wanted to get into marketing, and that was my perfectly good reason to do an MBA. I wanted that power where I decide what to build, how to build it. And an MBA would equip me with the tools that will make sure that I make the right decisions. Are frequent job changes considered a negative? Um, if you're changing jobs without any reason, then yes, they are considered a negative. It shows that you don't know what you're doing. You're not able to make good decisions that you're able to live with. On the other hand, if you have job changes that lead to increased responsibility, if you're moving from one opportunity to another where the next opportunity gives you greater exposure, greater responsibility, then no. Uh, as another question, let's see. How do you make an assessment of my current level? Use Coloranium quizzes. Vineet says, if I keep studying for SC till I hit 80% on Scholarium and then move on to CR and RC, how do I keep reviewing to prepare so I don't write some things that I learned, so that I don't forget things? One thing which is there is, Vineet, if you reach 80% ability in SC, I'd say after studying CR, when you're reaching there, make sure you take notes, review those notes, spend a couple of days on SC after finishing CR, take a few ability quizzes. If you want to know precisely how to do this, write to our support team and ask for recording for GMAT Score Booster webinar. So ask for the recording of GMAT Score Booster webinar, and they'll tell you. Blue Skype says, do you suggest taking GMAT prep test after Scholarium? Again, depends on where you are. Look at the recording for GMAT Score Booster webinar. We look at these scenarios over there. Says, if I miss some live session on a weekend due to some other commitment, can I take them later on? Absolutely, you can. As I say, you have access for 6 months. We start a new batch every 20 days. You also get access to the recordings of the sessions. All the free session recordings are sent within 30 minutes because we can just send those recordings to you. All the paid sessions recordings are updated on the following Monday. So for the sessions that are done today, the recordings would be updated by noon Monday Pacific time. And Elimera, yes, as I said, you will get access to the recordings of 16th and 17th on the 18th. Okay. What score gives you a decent chance to get into NYU? That's a 730, 740. Tanya says, how do you justify frequent job changes Let me actually make sure I delete some questions. What in your essays, even if they might have been for the wrong reasons or relocation of the firm? Tanya, the first question is uh, 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 it's not the wrong reason if the firm's relocating, you can't relocate. That's a lot of people do that. Second thing is, which essay are you thinking about? I mean, talk to an admission consultant to really see, even if you need to justify that. Optional essay. Okay, the thing is, do you need to justify it? An optional essay can be used to highlight a bunch of things as well. So again, don't waste that opportunity if you don't, if you think that if you don't need to do it. Abhishek says I got into Vanderbilt, Owen, with 60% scholarship in Penn State's meal. Has a 710 on the GMAT and plan to give a shot next year. Have 7 years of experience. What would you suggest me to do? I don't know, Abhishek. What's your goal? And which school's more closely aligned with your goal? Where do you want to work? Which school gives you better opportunity to get into that place? 100% scholarship versus a 60% scholarship. I think 100% is really good, but if one school doesn't help you get to your goals versus the other, then I would really not choose that. Uh, the other piece is what's the energy level at various schools? So go talk to students, not the students that the admission committee tells you about, but students in general that you find through the web. Every school has Facebook pages, every school has LinkedIn profile. I mean, look on LinkedIn to find folks and talk to them. The energy level of student generally tells how good a school is. Uh, Primanku says if I have no concept in a starting score of 600, first of all, you can't get 600 with no concept. But if you have a starting score of 600, how long will it take for you to get to 700? About 80 to 100 hours. My rule of thumb is between 600 to 700, 1 hour for every 1 point of improvement. What should be the target score for ISB and IIMs with mechanical background? ISB 730 is always safe. Um, can I upgrade to on live prep after buying an online course? Yes, anyone can. You can upgrade to a live course even after buying an individual course. Tepper 730, 740 is typically what's important. Coming back to Tanya's question, how do you justify frequent job changes? Again, be very honest with the reasons and the reasons, doing a job change even for money is not a bad idea. I mean, in the end, in the world, we all are greedy, right? But doing job changes just because you didn't like something and then you did another job change because you didn't like what you did the job change for, that's something which is which I'd be worried about. Okay. So frequent job changes is not as bad a thing as long as you can justify it. Ahuja says, can students from humble backgrounds get adequate loans without any collateral to study in colleges with high tuition and living costs? I would say if you are from a humble background, study well and get a scholarship. Okay. One thing which is there is also when you have a very high score, there are ways in which your education can be funded. So yeah. Okay, guys, I'm going to take the last question. Vivek says, I have 9 years of experience in telecom. Which college and MBA should be best for my career progression? So, Vivek, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to stay in the same field, then be on the West Coast or on the Northeast. If you want to change your job, then, lots of opportunities out there. Okay. So it just depends on what you want to do. Okay, guys, with that, thank you very much for joining us today. And I hope you guys enjoy the webinar. And I want to see you on our portal in the next coming weeks.